By the time Aria Wynn reached the border town at the edge of the blood pine, she had already sold her last keepsake and one half of her soul. The other half, she had promised to bring back alive. The market was a bruise of light in the dark, lanterns swinging over crooked stalls, smoke and cheap ale hanging thick in the air. Men shouted prices. Women argued. A baby wailed somewhere under the din. Under it all ran another sound. Softer but sharper, the hiss of the word people thought she couldn't hear. Witch blood. Aria kept her chin down and her hood up, knuckles white around the curled scrap of parchment in her hands. The drawing on it was clumsy, the lines smudged from sweat and travel. But the face was clear enough if you knew who you were looking for, a girl with a serious mouth and a small scar slicing through her left eyebrow. Lena. Aria moved from stall to stall, holding up the parchment, the questions already raw in her throat. Have you seen this girl? She would have come through with soldiers from Lord Merrick's estate. Please. She's my sister. Some merchants wouldn't even glance at the sketch, waving her away like a stray dog. Others took one look, saw the shackles inked faintly at Lena's wrists, and turned their backs. A butcher muttered that he didn't want trouble. A woman selling trinkets crossed herself and shut the lid on her box. Aria swallowed hard, fighting the tremor in her voice, and moved on. She was almost at the end of the row of stalls when she heard them. Soldiers. 3 of them. Uniforms stained with road dust and drink, leaning against a wagon piled with barrels. Their laughter cut through the murmur of the crowd like a knife. Little witch girl screamed all the way to Blackspire. One of them bragged, thought the chains would melt right off her. Lord Merrick's going to have his fun with that one. Another said she had spark in her, might actually survive a few rounds. The third took a drink straight from a bottle, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and laughed. Survive. Not with what he's doing now. Aria's feet stopped moving. Her heart gave a wild, painful kick against her ribs. And for a moment the whole market narrowed to the sound of their voices and the word they had used, witch girl. Her fingers tightened on the parchment. She could turn away. She could walk on. But every mile she'd walked to get here, every coin she'd spent, every prayer she'd never believed in had brought her to this moment. Aria stepped forward. The soldiers barely noticed her at first. Just another cloaked figure in a sea of faces. She held out the parchment, forcing the words past the tightness in her throat. Excuse me. Have you seen her? The drunkest of the 3 squinted at the sketch, then at her. His gaze slid from the parchment to her face, slow and heavy, crawling over the shadowed line of her jaw. The way her hands shook, despite her best efforts to hold them steady. Then his eyes caught on the one thing she could never quite hide, her irises, dark as storm clouds, freckled with shards of silver. His expression changed. Well, I'll be damned, he said, straightening. Boys, look what wandered in. The others pushed off the wagon, coming closer. Aria took a step back, but there was nowhere to go. The crowd had shifted around them, giving the soldiers space in the way people did when trouble was about to start, and they didn't want to be part of it. The drunk soldier's lips peeled back in a grin that didn't reach his eyes. Those are some pretty eyes you've got, girl. Moon in 'em. You kin to that witch girl we took to Blackspire. Her blood ran cold. Her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. She opened it anyway. She's my sister, Aria said. The words came out hoarse, but clear. Tell me if she's alive, the soldier laughed, loud and harsh. Hear that witch blood runs in the family. He reached out, rough fingers aiming for her chin, wanting to turn her face this way and that, like she was a piece of livestock. Another man grabbed her wrist, jerking it up so hard her shoulder screamed. Should have checked everyone in that village, he slurred. Could have filled a whole wagon with your kind. Fear shot through her, sharp and bright. Power moved under her skin in answer. That thin, a dangerous thread of moonlight she'd spent her whole life burying. It sparked against her ribs, begging for release. No, she thought desperately. Not here. Not in front of them. Look at her. The second soldier jeered, eyes all silvered. Lord Merrick will pay double for this one. Maybe we don't even have to go back empty. The rest of his sentence never finished. A hand slipped around Aria's waist, not grabbing, not yanking, just settling there with a quiet, unshakable claim. Fingers spread warm over the worn fabric of her cloak, grounding her so firmly that for a heartbeat the world stopped tilting. A voice, low and even, spoke near her ear. Easy. It said, "You're manhandling my wife." The word hit harder than a thrown stone. Wife. The soldiers froze. Aria did too. Breath stalling. Every nerve suddenly aware of the man at her back. He stood close enough that she could feel the rise and fall of his chest. The calm steadiness of it, completely at odds with the tight coil in her own. Slowly, the drunk soldier released her wrist. "What did you say?" he asked. But his tone had changed. Less sure now, less amused. The man behind her didn't move his hand, didn't raise his voice. He stepped slightly to the side, enough that the lantern light spilled over his face. He was taller than any of them, broad-shouldered under a plain dark coat, hair tied back at the nape of his neck. His jaw was dusted with stubble. His mouth relaxed, but not soft. Only his eyes were sharp, cool, and assessing, taking in every soldier, like he was weighing them and finding them forgettable. "I said you're touching my wife," he replied. "Take your hands off her." Recognition flickered in the soldier's expressions. Not his name. Maybe. But something else. An awareness of the way people around them had gone quiet. Of the sideways glances being cast at the stranger. Of the subtle step back from the nearest onlookers as if they didn't want to be too close when this man decided he'd had enough. Didn't know she was taken. One of them muttered, "She didn't look like." The stranger's eyes narrowed just a fraction. "Now you do," he said. "Walk away." There was no threat in his tone. He didn't need to raise it. The promise was in the way he stood. Relaxed, but ready. In the way his hand curved more firmly around Aria's hip. In the stillness that coiled in his shoulders like a predator waiting for an excuse. The drunk soldier held his gaze for a second longer than was wise. Then he spat on the ground near Aria's boots, muttered something about not worth it, and jerked his head at the others. They backed off, melting into the crowd, taking their laughter and their poison words with them. Only when they were gone did the stranger let out a breath. His grip on Aria loosened, but he didn't step away entirely. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. She realized her knees were shaking. She forced them to hold. "I'm fine," she said, even though her voice trembled. "Good," he replied. "Then let's get you somewhere they won't be tempted to change their minds." He guided her away from the main thoroughfare, through a gap between stalls and into a narrow side alley, where the wind smelled less like ale and more like the distant pine of the forest. Only then did he release her completely. Aria spun to face him, clutching the parchment like a shield. "I don't know you," she said, pulse still pounding in her ears. "You had no right to." "Call you my wife," he finished, one corner of his mouth tipping up. "You're welcome. By the way," she opened her mouth to snap back, but the words caught. Up close, the stranger was even more unsettling. Not just because of his height or the hint of muscle under his coat, but because of what she didn't see. No insignia, no lord's colors, no fear. "What do you want from me?" Aria asked. He studied her for a long moment, eyes moving over her face, lingering for half a heartbeat on the silver in her irises, the parchment in her grip, the way she angled her body like she was ready to bolt at any second. "Aria Wynn," he said at last, as if tasting her name. "You're far from home." Her heart stuttered. She hadn't given him her name. He went on before she could deny it. "I've seen other prisoners dragged through this town. he said. Same shackles. Same crest. Same screams. One of them matched that sketch in your hand. Her fingers tightened on the parchment. My sister. She whispered. I know. The stranger said. Lena Wynne. Taken by Lord Merrick's men. He nodded toward the looming shadow of the blood pine. Black against the night sky. They took her into the forest. Toward Blackspire. Fear and hope crashed together inside Aria so violently it almost knocked her off her feet. He shouldn't know any of this. He shouldn't know Lena's name. He shouldn't know hers. Who are you? She asked. The wind picked up, carrying the faint. A wild scent of pine and something else beneath it. Something older. The stranger's gaze never left hers. Name's Thorn, he said. Thorn Valen. He tipped his head toward the tree line. You won't survive that forest alone. Aria. But I can take you to someone who's seen your sister. She hesitated. Every warning her mother had ever whispered, thrumming in her veins. Don't trust strangers. Don't follow men into dark places. Don't let anyone see what you are. And what do you get out of it? She asked. Thorn's expression shuddered for a moment. Some faint flicker of something like anger or grief, flashing behind his eyes and vanishing just as quickly. Lord Merrick and I have unfinished business, he said. Helping you hurts him. That's enough for me. Behind him, the blood pine loomed. Its trees like teeth in the sky. Every story Aria had ever heard said no one walked into those woods and came back out. But Lena was somewhere beyond that black wall of branches. And the only hand reaching for her belonged to a stranger who lied like a husband and watched her like a hunter. Choose, Thorn said softly. Stay here and wait for Merrick's men to find you. Or come with me. Aria looked at his outstretched hand. Then she took it. The blood pine closed around them like a mouth. One moment. Aria and Thorn were riding under a strip of open sky. The border town shrinking behind them. The next. The forest swallowed the road whole. Trees rose in tight ranks, their trunks black in the pale wash of moonlight. Mist threaded low between them, glowing faintly where it caught on strange fungi blooming along the roots, sickly blues. Ghostly greens. The air changed too. Colder. Thicker. Every breath tasted like earth and sap, and something older. Something watching. Thorn rode ahead, hands loose on the reins. Posture relaxed in a way that didn't fool Aria for a second, even when he looked at ease. There was a tension in him, a wolf-like stillness. His gaze flicked to every sound, every shiver of leaves. Moonlight slid over the scars that cut along his knuckles, vanished into the collar of his shirt. They rode in silence for a long time, hooves muffled by the thick carpet of needles. Aria's thoughts circled the same points, Lena. Blackspire. The soldiers' laughter. And always, beside those images, the feel of Thorn's hand on her waist, back in the market, steady and sure. As if he had done it 1,000 times. You've done a lot of riding for a village girl, Thorn said at last, breaking the quiet. Not many make it this far. Aria kept her eyes on the path. Not many have a reason. Your sister's enough reason for anyone, he said. But it's not just that. The mist curled around their horses' legs. Somewhere in the distance, something howled. The sound wasn't quite wolf. Not quite anything she'd ever heard. It raised the hair along Aria's arms. What else would it be, she asked. Thorn's gaze slid to her, sharp even in the dim. You walk like someone used to hiding what she is, not where she goes. Her fingers tightened on the reins. The power in her chest stirred, sensing its own name in his words. I'm a herbalist, she said, steady as she could. That's all. Herbalists don't get called witchblood in markets, he replied. They don't get their sisters taken in chains by men who collect unusual talent for Lord Merrick. Believe what you want, Aria said. I patch people up with nettle tea and prayer. That's it. For a moment, she thought he would push, strip the lie bare. Instead, Thorn looked ahead again. "Fine," he said. "You're a simple herbalist. I'm just a man who doesn't like Merrick," the forest answered with another distant howl. They rode deeper. The light thinned until it was nothing but silver threads breaking through the canopy. Shadows lengthened. The glowing fungi brightened, throwing sick colors over bark and stone. Aria felt eyes on her. The prickling weight of a gaze she couldn't place. Once, she glimpsed them between the trees, eyeshine low to the ground, bright as coins, tracking their progress. Not human. Too wide, too steady. But when she looked again, they were gone. "Did you see?" that she whispered. "Keep your eyes forward," Thorn said quietly. "And whatever you hear, don't run." The path narrowed, winding between boulders and roots. The horses' ears pinned back. Their breath came faster, pluming white in the cold. Then the forest went very still. No wind, no creak of branches. Even the insects seemed to hold their breath. Thorn swore under his breath a word in a language Aria didn't know. He swung off his horse in one smooth movement and reached up to lift her down. His grip was firm, his face suddenly sharper. All pretense stripped away. "Behind that rock," he said, nodding to a slab of stone jutting from the earth. "Stay low. Don't move unless I tell you. Thorn. Now." "Aria." There was something in his voice that made her obey before she could argue. She slipped behind the rock, heart pounding, stone cold and damp against her back. From here she could see the path, the horses shifting nervously. Thorn, standing between them and the darkness. It came out of the mist, a shape at first, then several. Huge. Wrong. Their outlines blurring in a way that made her eyes ache if she stared too long. Not wolves. Not exactly. Their bodies were too long, joints bending at strange angles, patches of fur missing where skin had turned black and cracked like burned wood. Their eyes glowed a sickly violet. Tainted creatures, twisted by something human hands had no business touching. The largest of them let out a low, rattling growl. Saliva dripped from its jaws, sizzling where it hit the ground. It paced closer, hackles rising, gaze locked on Thorn. Aria pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from crying out. Thorn didn't step back. He rolled his shoulders once, like a man easing into a familiar weight. When he spoke, his voice had dropped lower. "Rougher. You picked the wrong hunt," he told the creatures. "Go back to whatever hole Merrick dragged you from." They lunged. Aria saw only flashes after that. Thorn moved, and it was like watching a shadow fight. 1 second he stood where she'd last seen him. The next, he was somewhere else entirely. Impossibly fast. Claws not his raked across his chest, tearing fabric. He caught one of the creatures by the throat and threw it against a tree so hard the trunk shuddered. For a heartbeat, his face turned toward her hiding place. His eyes were no longer brown. They burned, molten gold in the dark, wild and bright. The sound that ripped from his chest when another beast bit into his shoulder was not human. It shook the ground, rattling Aria's teeth. A growl so deep it seemed to rise from the bones of the forest itself. Something cracked bones. Several sets. Fast and awful. Fabric tore. The shape of him blurred at the edges, like he was something more and the night was trying to decide which part to show her. She squeezed her eyes shut, breath coming in small, sharp bursts. The magic in her veins woke fully now. Frantic, pushing against her skin as if it wanted to burst out and run with whatever he was becoming. When silence fell, it fell hard. Aria opened her eyes. The clearing was a ruin of disturbed earth and broken bodies. The tainted creatures lay twisted among the roots. Their poison eyes dimmed, black ichor soaking into the soil. Thorn stood in the middle of it all, chest heaving. His shirt hung in tatters. Claw marks raked across his ribs and shoulder, blood dark against his skin. Muscles bunched and flexed as he rolled his neck, as if resettling bones that had been forced out of place. His eyes still held a faint ring of gold around the pupils, fading slowly back to their usual color. "Aria," he said quietly. "You can come out now." Her legs felt numb as she stepped from behind the rock. He turned to look at her, and some of the wildness softened. Up close, the wounds looked worse, deep, raw, edges already swelling. "You're hurt," she said. "I've had worse," he replied. "They'll close." She knew shifters, if that's what he was, healed faster than humans. But even fast-healing flesh could still bleed out. The herbs in her satchel were a useless weight at her side. She could pack the wounds, wrap them, slow the damage, or she could do what she was. Her hand lifted before she could stop it. "Let me see," Aria said. "Please." He studied her, as if weighing the danger of refusing. Then he nodded. Just once. She stepped closer. Heat radiated from his skin, mingling with the faint metallic scent of his blood and something else beneath it. Something wild and clean. Like rain on stone, the largest gash tore across his forearm. Muscle laid open, blood oozing slow and steady. Aria swallowed. "This will sting," she murmured. She set her fingers lightly above the wound and opened the door inside herself. Moonlight answered, soft and silver, rising like a tide under her skin. It flowed down her arm in a quiet, aching rush, into her palm, into Thorn's torn flesh. The glow was faint but real, lighting the edges of the wound from within, knitting torn muscle, coaxing skin to close. The smell of blood sharpened, then eased as it slowed. Thorn went absolutely still. His breath hitched once. Not from pain, but from recognition. Heat flared under her hand, like her magic met something in him that pushed back. Not in rejection, but in startled response. For a heartbeat. She swore she felt another pulse thrum against her own, deeper, older, answering her light with something dark and steady. Then it was gone. The wound closed, faded to an angry pink line, then to nothing at all. Aria snatched her hand back as if burned, heart racing. The forest seemed to lean in closer, listening. "You shouldn't be able to do that," Thorn said. His voice was low, rougher than before, eyes darker around the edges. Not angry, not yet, but shaken. "Merrick's men are looking for someone with a gift like that," he went on. "Someone who can undo what he does." Aria's fingers curled into fists. "If you're taking me to him anyway," she said, throat tight. "What does it matter?" For a long moment, they stood there in the ruined clearing, the ghosts of monsters at their feet, the mist curling around their boots. For the first time, Aria wondered if she wasn't just chasing danger, but walking beside it. Hollowfen was not what Aria imagined a den of monsters would look like. By the time they reached it, the moon was high overhead, a pale coin behind ragged clouds. Thorn led her through a narrow cleft in the rock, past a waterfall that fell in silver sheets, its roar masking their passage. On the other side, the forest opened into a hidden hollow, ringed by pines and lit with warm, golden firelight. Cabins clung to the hillside, built from dark timber and stone, smoke rising from their chimneys. Clotheslines sagged under the weight of drying laundry. Someone had strung lanterns between poles, their glass panes painted in soft colors that turned the air into a shifting wash of amber and rose. Children ran between the cabins, bare feet thudding on packed earth. An elder sat on a stump, carving runes into a length of wood, shavings gathering at his boots. A woman laughed, tossing a chunk of bread to a dog that wasn't quite a dog, its ears a little too pointed, its eyes a little too bright. As Thorn and Aria rode in, heads turned, for a heartbeat, silence fell. Then a boy no older than 8 straightened from where he'd been swinging a wooden sword and snapped a salute so fierce it nearly sent him tumbling. "Alpha," he called. The word rang out and seemed to settle over everything. Aria's hands tightened on the reins. Thorn dismounted, patting his horse's neck, the title rolling off him as if it weighed more than any armor. He reached up to help Aria down again, fingers steady at her waist. She tried not to think about how natural it felt. "Welcome to Holofen," he said. "Home of the monsters you were taught to fear." But the monsters had children's faces and worried eyes. Hands roughened by work, not war. They watched Aria with open curiosity. Some with distrust. Some with hope. A woman with short, dark hair and a scar across her cheek strode toward them, wiping her hands on her trousers. Her gaze flicked from Thorn to Aria and back. "Bryn," Thorn said. "This is Aria Wynn. She's looking for someone Merrick took to Blackspire." Bryn's eyes narrowed. "And you brought her here because we're not the only ones Merrick is experimenting on," he replied quietly. "Her sister is in his hands too." Bryn's mouth pressed into a thin line. She nodded once, but her gaze lingered on Aria, sharp and measuring. Before Aria could speak, small fingers tugged at Thorn's coat. "Alpha," the boy with the wooden sword whispered. "It's Mama. She's worse." His courage cracked on the last word. Fear flooded his eyes. Thorn's expression changed. The hardness in it didn't disappear, but something raw bled through. "Leo," he said, dropping to a crouch so they were eye level. "Where is she?" "In the healer's cabin." Leo choked out. They said there's nothing else to try." Merrick's name hung unspoken between them. Aria saw the silver band circling the boy's wrist, a faint scar where metal had once bitten too deep. The same corrupted sheen clung to the edges of his aura, the way his hand went unconsciously to his chest with each breath, as if to check it was still there. Marek wasn't just hunting monsters. He was making them, breaking them, and wiping out anyone who didn't fit his design. "I'm a herbalist," Aria heard herself say. "Maybe I can help." Bryn's eyes narrowed further. "We've had healers. The wound won't close. The poison won't stop." Aria swallowed. "Then you've had herbs." "Not me." Thorn glanced between them. "Show her," he told Leo gently. The boy grabbed Aria's hand. Small fingers desperate and hot, he led her through the hollow, past the fire pits and the staring faces, to a low cabin that smelled of smoke, sweat, and something sour underneath it all. Inside, the air was thick and heavy. A woman lay on a narrow cot, sheets soaked through with sweat. Her skin, where it wasn't ghost pale, was marred by black veins radiating from a puckered wound near her collarbone. Silver burns ringed it like a cruel necklace. Her breath came in quick. Shallow gasps. Aria's stomach twisted. Marek's work was written all over this woman's body. "We took the silver out," Bryn said from the doorway. "Too late. Whatever he put on it is still inside her." Aria stepped closer. The magic inside her recoiled and reached all at once, recognizing the corruption, wanting to burn it out, terrified of what it might cost. If she failed, they would know she was more than she claimed. If she succeeded, they would know she was more than she claimed. Leo's voice shook. "Please, don't let her die." Aria looked down at the woman, at the mother who had probably stood where she stood now, once, begging someone else to save her child. She thought of Lena, chained and terrified and alone. The choice was no choice at all. She set her satchel down, fingers brushing familiar pouches and bundles. Rosemary, willow bark, dried yarrow, comforting lies. She pulled them out anyway, crushing leaves, boiling water, letting the motions ground her. Then she pressed her hands to the woman's skin. The room shrank to the circle of her fingers on fevered flesh, to the smell of herbs and blood, to the ragged pull of breath under her palms. Aria closed her eyes. "Moon," Hear me, she whispered. Not sure if it was prayer or challenge. Take what you need. Give what you can, light answered. It rose from the center of her chest, spreading through her arms like warm water, gathering in her hands until her skin glowed faintly from within, not bright enough to spill through the cracks in the door, but enough to paint the woman's throat in soft silver. The black veins shuddered. Aria focused, pushing past her own fear, past the sweat beating at her temples. The corruption under her hands was thick and stubborn, clinging to the woman's blood like tar. Aria found it, gripped it with her will, and pulled, slowly, painfully. The black retreated. Lines faded from coal to gray. From gray to nothing. The woman's breathing eased. The frantic flutter under her ribcage, settling into something steadier. The scent in the room changed. Less rot. More herbs. More life. When Aria opened her eyes, the wound was no longer ringed with poison. Pink, healing flesh peeked through clean edges. A normal fever sheen replaced the waxy pallor. The woman's lashes fluttered. She blinked, gaze wandering, then focusing on the ceiling as if it was the first time she'd seen it in days. Leo, she whispered. A sob tore out of the boy's throat. He threw himself at her side, clutching her hand, laughing and crying all at once. Outside, the hollow rippled with the news. Voices rose. Footsteps approached, then halted at the door. Hovering, the miracle spread faster than any poison. Thorn appeared in the doorway, shoulders filling the frame. His eyes went to the woman, to the smooth color returning to her cheeks, to the black veins that were no longer there. Then they went to Aria. She swayed, sudden exhaustion tugging at her limbs. He crossed the room in 3 strides, steadying her with a hand at her elbow. Whatever you are, Aria win, he said softly, a voice rough with something that wasn't quite awe and wasn't quite fear. Marek will raise the world to ash to get his hands on you. His fingers tightened just enough for her to feel the tremor he was trying to hide, and so would anyone who called himself Alpha. Night settled over Holofen in shades of ember and shadow. The central fire burned low and steady, a deep orange heart in the middle of the hollow. Sparks drifted up toward a sky thick with stars. Disappearing into the dark, someone plucked at a stringed instrument near one of the cabins. A slow, thoughtful melody threading through the murmur of quiet voices. Aria sat at the edge of the firelight, her hands wrapped around a wooden cup, more for warmth than thirst. The healer's cabin still clung to her smoke and sweat and the sharp tang of Marek's poison. Her magic lay quiet for the first time in hours. A tired ache under her skin. Across the flames, Thorn spoke low with Bryn. The beta's expression was thunder, arms folded over her chest. She leaned in, every line of her frame tight. You shouldn't have brought her here, Bryn said. A stranger with moon magic. Marek wants you. Led a torch into a powder store. Thorn's gaze flicked toward Aria. The fire picked out the angles of his face, the shadow of dark stubble along his jaw. She saved Leo's mother, he said. You saw those veins. She did what none of our healers could. That's not the point, Bryn hissed. Marek is hunting someone like her. You think he won't sniff his way here now? We're exposed. The pack is exposed. We've been exposed since the day Marek started experimenting on our people. Thorn replied. This doesn't change that. Bryn's eyes narrowed. You're not thinking like an alpha. No, he said. I'm thinking like the man who watched that boy stand beside a deathbed and beg me to save his mother. The music faltered, picked up again. The fire cracked, sending a small shower of sparks into the air. Bryn blew out a breath, some of the fury slipping into weary resignation. Then think like both, she said. Because if you're wrong about her, Thorn, we won't get a second chance. She left him with that, turning away toward Lio's cabin. After a moment, Thorn walked around the fire and stopped beside Aria. Come on, he said quietly. It's quieter up there. He led her to a low rise on the edge of the hollow, where the ground dropped away in a gentle slope, and the trees opened just enough to show a slice of sky. From here, the fire below was a distant glow. The voices a soft hum under the sound of night insects. They sat side by side on a flat rock. The air held a chill that hadn't been there at dusk. For a while, they didn't speak. Thorn's attention tracked the hollow who came and went, where the children slept, which cabins had a light still burning. Aria watched the flames instead, tiny and far, the way they licked at the darkness and held it back. You grew up being told we were the enemy, Thorn said at last. It wasn't a question. Aria let out a small, humorless huff. Stories, she said, told by our elders when the wind howled too loud. Stay away from the blood pine. Shifters steal babies. Curse the land. Eat the hearts of anyone foolish enough to wander too close. And now you've met us. Her gaze drifted to the hollow, to the boy with the wooden sword, now sleeping in his mother's arms, to the elders with their carved runes and tired hands, to the cabins that looked like any other village. If you didn't know what its people became under a different moon, you're not what I expected, she admitted. What did you expect? He asked. Fangs in every mouth. I expected. She searched for the right word, then shook her head. Not this. Not a place that feels like home. The word slipped out before she could catch it. Heat rose in her cheeks. She wrapped her fingers tighter around her cup to hide the tremor. Thorn's shoulder shifted as he turned to look at her fully. We're not saints, he said. My people have claws. We fight. We've done things I'm not proud of to survive Merrick and the men who came before him. He paused. But we're not monsters, he finished. No matter how many stories your village told, silence spun out between them. Soft but taut. Back there, Aria said quietly. In the forest. When those creatures came, you moved like nothing I've ever seen. And your eyes, she trailed off. The memory of molten gold still burned behind her eyelids. You already know what I am, Thorn said. Yes, she answered. A shifter. A man who turns into something with teeth sharp enough to tear those things apart. He huffed a small laugh. That's one way to put it. What I don't understand, she went on, is why they called you Alpha. Why they look at you like you hung the moon. He was quiet for a long time. The blood pine didn't always belong to Marek's kind, Thorn said finally. Before nobles drew maps and claimed what they didn't bleed for, there were packs. Old ones. Mine was one of them, his hand curled over his knee, fingers digging into his trousers. When my father died, he continued, the title passed to me. Not Lord. Not General. Alpha. The one who stands between the pack and the things that want to kill us. The one who makes the decisions that keep them alive, or gets them all killed. Aria's breath caught. You're not just some wanderer with a grudge, she said slowly. You're the Bloodpine Alpha. He inclined his head. No pride in it. Just a simple acknowledgement of weight, ruler of every shifter in this forest, he said. For whatever that's worth, these days. Her heart knocked hard against her ribs. The man who'd claimed her as wife in a filthy market was a king. In all the ways that mattered. He commanded warriors, carried a people on his shoulders, and Aria had followed him into the heart of his territory. The place every story had painted as a wolf's den. You should have told me, she whispered. Would you have come if I had, he asked. She thought of the first time she'd heard the word shifter, hissed like a curse. She thought of children cowering closer to the fire when elders spoke of wolves in the trees. Eyes like coins. Hunger like a storm that never passed. No, she admitted. I don't think I would have. Then I told you what you needed to hear, he said. You needed to find your sister. I needed someone who could do what you did today. He looked at his hands, flexing them once, as if seeing the blood that had been there hours before. I've lost people, Thorn said. More than I'll ever be able to live with. Some I couldn't reach in time. Some I chose not to risk others for. His throat worked around the words. I see their faces when I close my eyes. He went on. Every one I didn't save. When I saw Leo begging at his mother's bedside, I saw them all again. I wasn't going to add her to that list. And me, Aria asked softly. Where do I fit in that ledger of yours? His jaw tightened. You are the spark that might burn Merrick's work to the ground. He said, if I hand you over, maybe my people see another season. Maybe they don't. But if I let him keep you, there will come a day when no shifter cub anywhere in these forests wakes up without poison in their veins. He turned to her fully. Eyes, shadows, and starlight. So no, he said. I won't turn away from you. Not because I'm noble. Because I'm done burying people I might have saved. Her chest ached. She thought of Lena. Small and serious. Sneaking herbs from Aria's basket to plant behind their cottage. She thought of the way fear had tasted the day the soldiers came. My sister used to steal my cloak, Aria said, a voice barely above a whisper. It dragged in the dirt, and she didn't care. She'd follow me to the hills, pretend to be my apprentice, she said, if witch blood ran in my veins. It must run in hers too. And she wasn't going to let me face it alone. She swallowed hard. Then they took her. She continued. And for the first time, she really was alone, because I wasn't there. The firelight from below cast a faint glow up the slope, curling around the edges of Thorn's profile. His hand moved. Just a fraction. Like he meant to reach for hers and thought better of it. He did it anyway. His fingers brushed over the back of her hand. Calloused and warm. The touch was light. Almost nothing. But it sent a sharp, electric jolt up her arm. Her magic stirred, answering without her consent. Drawn to the heat of him like tide, to the pull of a distant moon, Thorn's breath hitched. His eyes dropped to where their skin met. Lingered there as if he could hear the tiny stutter in her pulse. My wolf is... He stopped, searching for the right word. Something caught between exasperation and wonder. Restless. When you're near. Loud. Is that bad? She asked. For me, he gave a faint, wry smile. Very. They sat like that for a while. Hands barely touching. The space between them filled with things neither of them knew how to say yet. Below. The hollow quieted one cabin at a time. The music faded. The fire burned down to coals. Later, when most of Hollowfen slept, Bryn passed Thorn on his way back from the ridge. She caught the look on his face, the lingering wildness in his eyes, and snorted softly. Your wolf is pacing whenever she's near. Bryn muttered. Don't pretend you don't know what that means. Thorn didn't answer. He didn't have to. The muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his gaze drifted back toward the healer's cabin, said enough. Aria thought she'd crossed the forest to find her sister. She hadn't realized she was walking straight toward the one heart the moon had already chosen for hers. Dawn came with a horn blast that tore the hollow out of sleep. Aria jerked upright on her pallet, heart racing, the echo of the sound still vibrating in her bones. Shouts rose outside. Boots pounding on hard-packed earth. Somewhere, a child began to cry. She threw on her cloak and stumbled into the chill morning air. The sky was a flat, colorless gray. The sun nothing but a pale smear behind low clouds. The comforting glow of cooking fires had been replaced by the colder gleam of steel. Shifters in human form grabbed weapons, pulled on boots, their movements quick and practiced. Aria Bryn's voice snapped across the hollow. Stay close to the cabins. What's happening? Aria demanded. Bryn didn't answer. Her eyes were on the tree line beyond the waterfall, where shapes moved between the trunks, shields catching the light. Armor plates clicking. Banners unfurling. A second horn answered the first. Lower. Meaner. Merrick's soldiers marched into view in tight, disciplined lines, surrounding the hollow in a tightening ring. Behind them rumbled machines Aria had never seen before, steel constructs on wheels, braced with braces and cranks, each one carrying a rack of glass vials that churned with a horrible, luminous liquid. It glowed a sick, unnatural blue, even from a distance. Aria felt her magic recoil. At the front of the formation, flanked by his finest guards, rode Lord Marek. He was exactly as the rumors had painted him, and somehow worse. Mid-40s. Dark hair slicked neatly back. A tailored coat that looked more suited to a court than a battlefield. His gloved hands rested lightly on the reins. Like this was nothing more than a morning ride. Beside him, on a separate horse, rode a smaller figure. At first, Aria thought some soldier had brought a standard-bearer's assistant. Another nameless face caught in Marek's orbit. Then the rider lifted her head. Lena's eyes found Aria across the distance as if pulled by a wire. They were too big in her thin face, ringed with sleepless shadows. The color dulled but unmistakable. Metal circled her throat, wrists, and ankles, etched with runes that hummed wrong against the air. Bruises bloomed along the edge of her jaw. The skin around one of the shackles was raw and angry, faintly threaded with dark veins. A gag bit into the corners of her mouth. Aria's world narrowed to that single, shattering image. "Lena," she whispered. Thorn stepped up beside her, his presence a solid wall at her back. His expression was not surprise. It was the cold, a controlled rage of a man who'd expected this and still hated being right. Marek drew his horse to a stop just beyond the line where shifters held theirs. "Blood Pine Alpha," he called, his voice carrying easily over the distance. "I see you've been busy collecting strays." He said it like a greeting between old acquaintances, like they'd met at dinner parties, not battlefields. "Lord Marek," Thorn replied. "You brought quite the crowd for a conversation." Marek smiled. "I find conversations go smoother when one side understands their position," he said. "And you, Thorn Valen, do not seem to grasp yours." His gaze slid past Thorn, searching. It landed on Aria, on the silver in her eyes, the way she stood half a step behind the Alpha. "There she is," he said lightly. "My missing piece." Whispers rippled through the pack ranks. Aria felt them like static on her skin. "The moon-touched healer," Marek went on. "The one who undoes my work. I should thank you for finding her for me. I've been looking," he gestured lazily. And one of the machines behind him lurched forward, pushed by a team of soldiers. Up close, Aria could see the vials more clearly. The way the liquid inside seemed almost alive, shifting and pulsing against the glass. "To business," Marek said. "You have something I want. I have something you want." He nodded toward Lena, whose horse danced nervously under her slight weight. "Hand over the witch," he said. "In return, I spare your pack and release the little sister. No more raids. No more experiments. I turn my attention elsewhere." Thorn's jaw clenched. "And if I don't?" he asked. Marek's smile didn't falter. He lifted a hand. "Then we do a demonstration." At his signal, the soldiers dragged a captive shifter forward, a young man Aria didn't know. Wrists bound, shirt torn. He stumbled, fell to his knees in the dirt in front of one of the machines. A vial was plucked from its rack and fitted into a steel syringe as long as Aria's hand. The blue liquid writhed. Eager. "Don't," Thorn snapped. Marek cocked his head. "You seem to be under the impression that you have leverage here." He nodded again. The syringe plunged into the captive's neck. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The young man arched, a strangled scream tearing from his throat as the blue liquid surged under his skin. It raced through his veins like lightning-made disease, turning every line black, every capillary a map of agony. His eyes rolled back, then burst open wide. glowing the same unnatural blue for a heartbeat before going dull. He collapsed, body twitching once, twice, then went still. The smell hit a moment later, sharp and wrong, like burning hair and spoiled meat. Around Aria, shifters flinched. Someone cursed. Someone else whispered a prayer in a language older than the nobles. "This is the refined version," Marek said conversationally. "Designed to ignore humans entirely and seek only your kind. Imagine a few dozen vials launched into your dens while your children sleep." He gestured to the circle of machines. Each one loaded. Each one pointed inward. Panic clawed up Aria's throat. She saw it mirrored in the faces around her, the mothers, the elders, the children peeking from behind cabin doors. "Stop," she said, stepping forward before she knew she was moving. "Stop this." Thorn's hand shot out, catching her arm. "Don't," he said under his breath. "He's baiting you." "And what happens if I don't bite?" she hissed back. "He poisons all of you anyway." "You think he'll keep his word if we hand you over?" Thorn demanded. "You think he won't use you? Then come for us when he's done." "Maybe," she said. "Maybe not. But I know what happens if I stay." Her voice broke as she looked at Lena again. At the raw skin, where shackles had rubbed. "He has her," Aria whispered. "He has this poison, and he will use both until there's nothing left in these woods but ash." Marek spread his arms, addressing the hollow. "One girl," he called. "That's all I ask. One girl who doesn't belong to you. Give her to me. And you keep your precious Alpha. Your pups. Your homes." Somewhere in the crowd, someone made a small, choked sound. Not agreement, just fear. Too honest to hide. Thorn's fingers tightened on Aria's arm. "I won't trade a life for a life," he shouted back. "Not hers. Not anyone's." Marek's smile thinned. "Then I'm afraid you misunderstand me again," he said. "I'm not bargaining. Thorn, I'm offering you a choice in how your people die." He snapped his fingers. Soldiers cranked the machines into position, the angle of their muzzles adjusting with a series of metallic clicks. Each one pointed toward a different cluster of cabins. Toward the dens. Toward the school hut. Toward the healer's cabin. Aria felt the moment the pack shifted from fear to something like despair. The realization that this was not a fight they could win cleanly. Not without losing more than they could bear. Thorn's hand shook on her skin. "I'll find another way," he said, voice breaking around the edges. "I always do." She laid her hand over his, stilling it. "You gave me a place at your fire," Aria said quietly. "You let me heal your people. Let me pay for it." He turned to her, eyes wild. "I won't hand you to him," Thorn said. "I won't watch." "You won't," she said. "You'll watch your pack live. You'll get Lena back. And then you'll come for me." Her smile was small and terrible. "Or has the great Bloodpine Alpha already decided I'm not worth the risk?" she asked softly. Pain flashed across his face like someone had struck him. She slipped from his grasp before he could stop her and walked forward. Each step heavier than the last. But steady. The pack parted around her without touching, their fear like static on her skin. When she reached the front line, Aria lifted her chin and looked straight at Marek. "I'm here," she called. "Let her go." Marek's eyes lit with cold delight. "There she is," he murmured. "Come closer." "Girl," she did. "Release Lena," Aria said, "and pull those machines back from the dens." "Now," Marek clicked his tongue, but he gestured, and the soldiers eased the machine's aim a fraction away from the cabins. Another hand signal, and the gag was cut from Lena's mouth. She sucked in a ragged breath, tears streaking clean tracks through the grime on her face. "Aria," she croaked. "It's all right." Aria lied. "I'm here. Of course I'll keep my end," Marek said smoothly. "You step into my custody. Your sister walks free into your Alpha's loving arms. The way he said alpha made it an insult. Aria squared her shoulders and crossed the last few yards until the nearest of Merrick's men could reach out and seize her. Cold metal closed around her wrists, binding them tight. She didn't flinch. Behind her, the hollow held its breath. "Let her go," Aria demanded again. Jerking her chin toward Lena, Merrick flicked his fingers. Lena's horse was turned and guided toward the line of shifters. Soldiers moved out of the way, weapons held ready but not raised. The shackles on Lena's ankles and wrists remained. The collar stayed locked. "You didn't say how free," Marek said mildly. "But she'll be breathing. For now." "That's generous." Two soldiers grabbed Lena's reins, half dragging, half leading her toward Thorn. She stumbled, nearly falling, hands bound too tightly to catch herself. Aria's teeth sank into her lip hard enough to draw blood. Soldiers shoved her toward a waiting wagon. The iron bars glinted dully in the gray light. She climbed up without being told. At the top of the steps, she turned. Thorn stood at the front of his people, every line of him taut as a drawn bow. His hands were clenched at his sides, nails biting into his palms. His eyes, even at that distance, burned with a gold Aria had only seen in the dark of the forest. She held his gaze as the chains bit into her wrists, as the door clanged shut behind her, as the lock slid home with a final, echoing click. It wasn't the chains that hurt, it was the look on his face, as if his wolf had finally found his mate, only to watch her walk into the butcher's hands. Blackspire Keep was a wound carved into the mountain, and Aria learned quickly how deep it went. Stone hallways swallowed sound. Iron doors shut like the closing of jaws. Runes crawled over the walls in cold silver, throbbing faintly whenever she passed, humming against the magic in her veins. They took Lena one way and Aria another, their fingers torn from each other's in a last, desperate clutch. After that, Aria saw her sister only in flashes dragged past a doorway, pale under torchlight, runes burning against the collar at her throat. Then the door would slam, and Aria was left with Lord Merrick and his instruments. He made her watch the first time. A shifter prisoner was dragged into the chamber and strapped to a table. Eyes wild, teeth bared, Marek spoke to him with clinical detachment, asking questions as he prepared a syringe full of glowing blue liquid. Aria begged. She screamed. It didn't matter. When the poison hit the man's veins, he convulsed in agony. The sound that tore from him wasn't human or animal, it was both. And neither. And it scraped something raw inside her. "Now heal him," Marek said. If she refused, he died screaming. If she obeyed, Merrick watched her every move, every flicker of light under her skin, taking notes, refining his formula. Each time she saved a life, he learned more about how to end others. He told her Thorn would never come. An alpha doesn't risk a whole pack for one woman, Merrick murmured as another prisoner writhed. He'll cut his losses, like any good leader. One sacrificial lamb to keep his wolves safe. When she met his eyes, he smiled. "And when I perfect this," he said, lifting a vial between two fingers, "I'll wipe out every shifter in those woods. Then I'll turn my attention to pretty little villages with girls like you." Witch blood makes such interesting subjects. The thought of Thorn, of Holofen, of Leo and his mother, made her stomach twist. The magic inside her felt filthy, complicit every time she used it, guilty every time she didn't. One day, when Merrick ordered her to heal another man, she broke. She stepped to the prisoner's side, took his shaking hand in both of hers, and whispered, "I'm sorry," instead of calling the light. She held on while he died, heart cracking with every ragged breath, and refused to give Merrick what he wanted. He let the man go still before backhanding her hard enough to send her sprawling. "You'll break," he said calmly. "Everyone does. The question is how many bodies we stack before you stop pretending you have a choice." She lay on cold stone, blood in her mouth. Shaking, but she didn't call the light. Outside the fortress walls, another war was brewing. In Holofen, Thorn stood before his pack with armor strapped tight and rage banked hot behind his eyes. Bryn argued herself hoarse. "This is suicide," she said. "He has poison that can wipe us out. You're leading us into a slaughter. If we let them keep her, if we let them perfect that poison, all of us are dead anyway." Thorn answered, "Maybe not today, but soon, one den at a time." He looked toward the distant mountain. Storm clouds gathering over Blackspire like a crown of bruises. "If I'm going to die," he said, "I'll do it with her name on my lips." Not waiting in the shadows, wolves howled their answer. Both sides moved toward the same bloody point on the map. One out of obsession, one out of love. Night fell hard and angry over Blackspire when the pack arrived. Thunder rolled. Lightning flashed, turning the gray stone walls into jagged bones against the sky. Aria woke in her cell to a sound she felt more than heard, a distant roar that stirred something wild under her skin. Thorn, his wolf calling to hers. Another boom followed. Closer this time. Not thunder, but the crash of something heavy, slamming against the outer gates. Shouts rose. Horns blared. The fortress came alive with the chaos of battle. Guards rushed past her door. For a moment, the corridor stood empty. Aria looked at the small shard of silver she'd palmed days ago. Snapped off one of Merrick's abandoned instruments when no one was looking. Her hands shook as she knelt by the lock. Breath coming fast. Sweat slick on her palms. "Come on," she whispered. "Just this one thing. Then you can break." The shard slid into place. Runes shivered. Sparks snapping against her fingers. She pushed a sliver of moonlight into the mechanism. Not to heal, but to disrupt. To confuse the pattern until it gave way. The lock clicked. She ran. Iron and stone blurred. She ducked through side passages, flattening herself into shadows whenever a soldier thundered past. Twice. She lifted her hands and sent small, blinding flares of light into men's faces, hearing their curses as they stumbled into walls. Above, on the battlements, the anti-shifter machines rolled into position. Vials of Merrick's perfected poison were loaded into catapults, their blue glow sick against the storm-dark sky. If he released that, every wolf below would die screaming. Aria burst onto the upper level, chest burning, hair plastered to her face with rain and sweat. The machines loomed over her, manned by soldiers too distracted by the battle below to see her at first. She didn't hesitate, for once. She didn't reach for the soft, mending part of her magic. She reached for the raw river beneath it, the part that hurt when she touched it, the part that had always frightened her. Her hands lit from within, brighter than they ever had before. White, searing light poured from her fingers into the nearest vial. The poison inside writhed, then screamed, a sound only she seemed to hear. Before the glass spiderwebbed with cracks, one shattered, then another, then all of them. The machines went up in a chain of furious, blinding explosions. Blue turned to white. Poison turned to harmless rain of light that drifted down over the battlefield like shattered stars. Below, Thorn looked up and saw the sky break open. He knew that light, knew the feel of it on his skin, the taste of it in his blood. His wolf surged, howling her name. In the control chamber, Marek's smile had finally slipped. He stepped out of the smoke like a man walking through a bad dream. Coat burned at the edges, eyes blazing with something close to madness. "You ruin everything you touch," he said, almost gently. "Fine. Let's see what you can do with this." He took a syringe from his belt and drove it into his own arm. The serum hit him like lightning. His body twisted, bones lengthening, teeth sharpening, veins darkening with a swirling mix of blue and black. His eyes glowed the color of the poison, and the void it came from. Half shifter, half nightmare. Marek moved faster than any human should. He slammed Aria into a wall, claws digging into her shoulders. "You could have been magnificent," he hissed. "At my side? Instead you choose them. I choose them every time." She rasped. He squeezed, and pain flared white-hot. Her magic, ragged and worn from the explosions, stirred one last time. Healing had always meant mending what was broken, bringing order where there was damage. Now, staring into Marek's twisted face, Aria understood something terrible and true. Some things shouldn't be healed. Some things had to be burned out from the root. She grabbed the front of his coat, dragged him closer, and opened the door inside herself all the way. Moonlight tore through her. Not gentle this time. Not soft. It flooded into Marek, seeking every thread of corruption, every place the poison had taken root. It caught on the serum in his veins and ignited it from within. He screamed, a sound that shook the stone. His body arched, convulsed, the monstrous lines of him flickering between forms as the magic ripped through him. The blue glow turned white, then gold, then nothing at all. When he hit the floor, he was just a man again, a dead one. Aria swayed over him, lungs burning, vision narrowing. The light that had always been there, that endless well she'd lived her whole life afraid of, was suddenly gone. Not entirely, but burned down to embers. Her knees buckled, the world tilted, the chamber spinning under her. She felt, distantly, the slam of the door, the rush of feet, heard Bryn curse. I heard someone roar her name like it hurt to say it. Thorn caught her before she hit the stone. He dropped to his knees, cradling her against his chest. Rain and sweat and blood all mixing on the floor. "Stay with me," he said, voice raw. "Aria, stay." Her pulse fluttered weakly under his fingers. Her skin, always warm with that quiet hum of magic, felt too cool. "I'm sorry," she whispered, lips barely moving. "I brought this to your door. I brought war to your pack. You brought hope," he said fiercely. "You brought a future. You killed the man who was trying to end us." Her eyes found his, hazy but clear enough to hold his gaze. "I'd choose you again," she breathed. "You and Lena. Every time." Then her breath hitched, and he felt the stutter. The beginning of the end. Behind him, Bryn's voice was tight. "Thorn," she said. Her magic's burned out. Her body's following. "There's nothing we can. There's one thing," he said. She went very still. "If you bind to her like this, you might go with her," Bryn warned. "Alpha, I think, I am," he said. "She is my mate." He bent his head, bringing his mouth close to Aria's ear. "Aria," he whispered, "I can tie you to me, to the pack, but I won't do it without your consent. Do you want this? Do you want me?" A faint smile ghosted over her lips. "Always," she breathed. He lowered his head to her throat. His teeth broke her skin, and the world flooded with white, not pain connection, as if the moon itself had taken both their souls and braided them together. Strand by shining strand, Thorn felt her life pour into him and his pour back. A loop closing, a circuit completed. His wolf howled. Not in grief this time, but in fierce, desperate joy. With the last of her strength, Aria turned her head and bit him back, teeth sinking into his shoulder, sealing what he'd begun. The bond snapped into place. For a heartbeat, everything held still. Then her pulse steadied under his fingers. Fragile but real. The fading magic in her flared. No longer a river but a shared spring, fed by something larger than either of them alone. The echo of Marek's serum, still hanging in the air like poison smoke, withered and died without its maker. Weeks later, Hollowfen looked different under the same sky. The wounds in the hollow healed, slowly damaged cabins rebuilt. Graves marked with stones and runes. The machines of war hauled away and broken down. Children laughed again, though sometimes their play turned frantic when thunder rolled. Lena walked among them, a scarf hiding the faint scars the collar had left. She sat by the fire and argued herbs with Aria, who listened and pretended not to get misty when Lena rolled her eyes exactly the way she always had. Aria's magic came quietly now, slower to answer, tied in some invisible way to the warmth at her back whenever Thorn entered a room. When he touched her, the embers flared. When he was far, they banked, but they never went out. One evening, they stood together at the edge of the blood pine, looking out toward the distant line of human farms and villages. The air smelled of pine and wet earth, of smoke and something new possibility. I don't know where I fit anymore, Aria admitted. Too witch for the villages, too human for the wolves. Thorn took her hand, his thumb tracing slow circles over her knuckles. You belong wherever you decide to stand, he said. But if you stand here, you stand as my equal, not my prisoner, not my sacrifice. My queen. She looked up at him, at the man the moon had led her to through fear and fire and blood, and felt the bond between them hum and answer. Aria crossed the blood pine to save the only family she had left. She just didn't know the moon was waiting on the other side, ready to give her a kingdom, and a king who would burn the world before he'd ever let her walk into the dark alone again. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Moonfire Tales so you never miss the next journey into magic, wolves, and impossible love.